As Superman would say, hello, Texas! We like Texas. All right, today we're going to be doing our Stan Lee panel. Stan likes me to come and be a little bit of Robin to his Batman. I'm going to wear my Texas Rangers shirt from 1975. When I was a kid, I was a Rangers fan, 75. All right, let me tell you a little bit about how I met Stan Lee. I went to my very first comic book convention. I was in Florida, 16 years old. And I was down there playing baseball. I ended up playing Pac-10 baseball in college. So I was down there for a baseball camp. I'm 16, and we're staying at a Holiday Inn. And as I come into the Holiday Inn, because we're going to take an airplane flight out the next day, I'm standing in line going, gotta go back home because I'm living in Canada, so I gotta go back to the snow. I'm in Florida, it's awesome. And all of a sudden I see this little sign and it says, comic book convention down this way. And I went, what? I had just started collecting comic books. And I went, there's a comic book convention at the hotel we're staying at tonight? Woo! So I went, Mom, I gotta go check something out. I walked down the hall, and there was a couple of people. The show wasn't very big, it was inside, and they had a couple artists out on the wall, and then they had a little table over here, and Stan Lee was there. Now, I'm 16, and I know that every book that I bought says Stan Lee Presents on every one of those books, right? Stan Lee Presents, I'm going, what? He's like the Pope. The Pope is here. So I'm trying to, at this point, I'm trying to teach myself how to draw comic books. And I go up to Stan and I go, hey, Mr. Lee, my name's Todd, and I'm trying to break into comic books, and I'm trying to learn drawing stuff. And you mind if I just sit at your table? And he said, sure, come on. And he didn't know me from Adam, could have been any one of you. And he let me sit right next to him for the rest of the night. And all I did was pepper him with questions. Like, how does the business work? What do I got to do to send in a sample? What kind of ink do I use? And he had a lineup because he was Stan Lee, though not quite as famous as weird as it is as he is today. But he had the people coming in, and he was as gracious back then as he is today. If you guys got to meet him, he had the same enthusiasm. It hasn't lost an ounce of enthusiasm. And he just let me stay there for 8 hours by his side as a nobody. And it made an impact to me. It made an impact. I remember that I said, when I left that convention, I met a couple other people, Mike Zeck, he was a good guy too, Pat Broderick, and then I met a couple other people I thought were a little snarly, and I went, if I'm ever on that side of the desk, I'm going to treat people like him. And Stan I just watched him back then, made people feel good, even though sometimes we only have 20 or 30 seconds with you, right? I wish we had more time, but we got to move the line. But he was just gracious and made everybody feel important. For me, he sort of gave me a memory. He doesn't remember it, but for me, it was a lasting impact that I ended up having in my career. So I ended up going fast forward, collecting even more comic books, and after we left Marvel, Stan and I were able to do some videos together. The thing that's sort of interesting is that for years, you guys probably don't know this unless you're a bit older, they were trying to make a Spider-Man movie for probably a decade. And I gotta tell you, it may be the only time in my life where lawyers were a good thing, because they fought over the rights of the Spider-Man comic book. That they said there was bankruptcies, and 6 companies around the globe said they had Spider-Man. And so it took a decade before they got all the rights back, and eventually Sony came out with the movie. Now here's why the delay of the lawyers was so good, is that it allowed technology to get awesome in that decade. Because if you guys remember, I don't know how many old folks we got here, but you remember they had the Spider-Man on TV, the live action. Does anybody remember? And he was there, and he would shoot, and then somebody would go cut, and they'd take the big net. Remember? The big net would get thrown on the guy, and it would be like somehow a net came out of his hand, and it dropped on him, and then all of a sudden they went cut. But fast forward 10, 12 years, and all of a sudden you've got computer graphics. And now, you can start doing all this crazy stuff that you would never have been able to do. And they tried, it was interesting. I knew Sam Raimi, who was the director of the first couple shows, and he had some of my comic books, and they had it with some of the people, the artists there. They tried to get humans to go into the positions I put them in, and he figured out that you couldn't do it, right? I mean, he tried, and then he actually got some people from Vegas, the Circus du Soleil people, and he brought them in to go, can you contort yourself? And I was like, Sam, I didn't draw it so that you could actually make these poses, which is why they ended up having to eventually just do computer-generated Spider-Man, because they just went, we can't do that shit, right? So we got to fake it, right? Because we're not. Look at the biggest thing that I did when I drew Spider-Man is that I always thought that the book was Spider-Man, and the emphasis was on the man, and I completely, to me, flipped it. And when I didn't really care about Peter Parker running around in this sweater and his blue jeans, I cared about the spider part of it. And so to me it was Spider-Man instead of Spider-Man. And that was really the biggest thing that I did with it. So I give him the big eyes, I give him the webbing, I give him everything. The webbing, just so you guys know, the webbing that I came up with was invented for one reason. Do you guys remember how the webbing used to be? It used to be like lines with X's in it, right? For years and years. The problem with that is that if you shoot it towards camera, it doesn't look like anything, right? So I got to come up with something so that I can shoot towards camera and look good. Now, not only did Stan Lee create Spider-Man, but he also created dozens and dozens and dozens of others. So let me just tell you right now, we'll get a little bit serious. I'll state the obvious. Stan Lee is not only a living legend, I think he is a national treasure. I do. And here's why. Because there are people now globally that know the characters that came out of his brain, and he co-created with other people, that may not even know the name Stan Lee. But the thoughts that were in his head that he put on the paper have now impacted people globally. And if any of you can come up with ideas that will impact an entire planet someday, I will call you a national treasure too. And so, especially in a little bit of a somber mood in light of what happened to Mr. Muhammad Ali, we should be grateful that this 93-year-old man is still here to regale us with his life. And with that, if you could stand on your feet, I would like to introduce Mr. Stan
something nice about somebody. Who the heck were you talking to?
I was talking about...
who are you talking about?
I was talking about some old guy that I know. So, Stan Lee. So, Stan...
Here's a guy who writes, who draws, who has his own toy company, and he's talking about... We could spend the whole afternoon talking about Todd McFarlane.
Hey, I'm in the cheap plastic goods business. It's a good occupation. So let's go back. Obviously, you've had such a long career, right? So what was the hardest part of getting into the business as a young man?
The hardest part was being hired. I heard there was a job open. It was a coincidence. I had a cousin who was married to a man who owned a publishing company. I didn't know them too well, but I was looking for work, and I was about 16 and a half, and somebody told me that this guy in his publishing company needed an assistant, a gopher, really. So I went up there, and he published all different kind of magazines, sport magazines, romance magazines, all kinds. And he also had a very small line of comic books that nobody paid attention to. And I found out that it was the comic book department that needed an assistant. And the department was run by two men, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And they had been doing Captain America. So they needed somebody to fill the ink wells. In those days they used ink, to clean the brushes, to go down and get them a sandwich, a stooge, a gopher. But it was a job, so I took it. And after a few days, if there was something, I'd look over the strips and I'd say, you know, this sentence could be better if it was written this way. And little by little, they allowed me to change some of the scripts when I looked at them in the strip. And before I knew it, I was in the editorial part of the comic department. For some reason, Simon and Kirby got fired after I had been working there a few months. I never knew why. But I was the only guy left in the department. So the publisher said, can you run things until I can hire a grown-up? Well, when you're 16 and a half, what do you know? I said, sure, I'll take care of it. And he probably forgot to hire the grown-up. So I had been there ever since. And that's the ridiculous way it started. If he had needed an assistant in the sport magazines, I might now be a famous sports star, but it just turned out the other way.
And you have the physique to go with it. So, what was the first sort of regular writing gig you had then? Like, did they give you an assignment?
No, what happened was after they were doing Captain America and they were doing the Human Torch and the Submariner. I think that was all they had. So my publisher said, can you make up some new characters? So I came up with some, nothing. One was called the Destroyer, one was called Father Time. He was able to manipulate time, and some others that I've forgotten. And it went on that way for a few years. And it's the reason I changed my name, because my name had been Stanley Martin Lieber, a real normal name. But people hated comic books. Parents didn't want their kids to read comics in those days, and I was embarrassed to be writing comics. So I changed my name to Stan Lee, and it went on that way for a few years. But then came the Fantastic Four, and I will pause for a moment and let that sink in. And I'll give you a moment.
Just to fill in the blank there, where you were saying parents didn't want you reading the comic books, because there was a guy out there that was saying that comic books were destroying the youth of America, and they were having congressional and Senate hearings about comic books, and it was the reason why a lot of companies ended up going out of business. They said all those monster comic books and all those horror comic books were actually leading to a downgrade of society, which is why the comic code comes along. But Marvel comic books comes out of the ashes of those Senate hearings, right? And so now we get the Fantastic Four, which is your first one. So Fantastic Four, why Fantastic? Why not Fantastic Five? Why four?
Well, Fantastic Four sounds better than Fantastic Five. If Fantastic Five sounded better, I got my throat. If Fantastic Five sounded better, I would have done Fantastic Five. With me, everything depends how it sounds. For example, the Hulk is an okay name, but the Incredible Hulk, there's a name. Spider-Man is okay, but the Amazing Spider-Man. I love adjectives. And that's the way it goes. So the Fantastic, I could have called him the Four. Who care about the Four? But the Fantastic Four. I shouldn't be teaching you all. You should have to learn it by yourself.
I'm ripping you off and taking it to Image tomorrow. So, okay, so let's also talk about some of the character names you have, besides obviously the Incredible Hulk and that, the actual human beings, right? You have this sort of repetitiveness in some of your characters to use the same letter for the first name and the last name. Peter Parker, Reed Richard, Sue Storm, right? Bruce Banner. So why did you do that for your characters?
Why did I call him Bruce Banner instead of Charlie Banner?
No, well, BB. Why'd you go BB, PP, SS?
It's so obvious. You haven't figured it out?
Yes, I did, but there are people who haven't heard the story out here, so we will enlighten them.
He really doesn't know the answer. He's faking. All right, I'll tell you the answer. It's very important that you know. But it must go no further than this room.
Don't take it to Houston.
I have the world's worst memory. And it's hard for me to remember the names of these idiot characters that I was making up. So if I called him Charles Banner, if I thought of the Charles, it still wouldn't tell me what the last name was, or vice versa. But if I thought of Bruce, I could say to myself, the last name also begins with B. And that gave me a clue, so I'd stay in the B's until I hit on Banner. And that's why I did it. Peter Parker. Took me a while to remember that name, but if I had one of the names, I knew the other one began with P, so I could eventually think of it. In fact, while I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm trying to remember his name. It's out of my mind completely.
But there was a bit of a slip up because in one of the issues it was David Banner and then Bruce Banner and it became, clever you, David Bruce Banner. So way to cover your ass. Good job.
You're absolutely right. I used to make it's hard for you to believe I could make a stupid mistake, but I used to make stupid mistakes like that. In fact, that was the origin of the famous Marvel No Prize. Would you like to tell about that?
No, but since it's your panel, you can. Go.
What happened was, because I have no memory and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, we made a lot of mistakes in the stories. I called people by the wrong name. So I get letters from readers, indignant letters. Don't you know the name of your own character? And I decided I had to do something about this. So I figured I'd make a game out of it. And I wrote one of my little editorials, one of my soapboxes. I said, from now on, anybody who finds something wrong, I think I used the dumb expression, who finds a boo-boo in our stories will get a no prize. Nobody knew quite what that meant. But what happened was, if somebody would write me a letter and say I called the Hulk the wrong name or something, I would send them an envelope that said, I think we were Timely Comics in that day, that said Timely Comics, the man's address, and it said, congratulations, and he'd open it up quickly, and inside it would say, you are a winner of a Timely Comics No Prize, and there'd be nothing inside, because there was a no prize. It took them a while to find out, but would you believe, even today, this morning, a middle-aged man came over to me and he said, Stan, I still have my no prize letter. Would you autograph it for me? So they meant a lot to people.
I remember people showing it to me. What? They give you a certificate saying you got nothing. And people were so excited, they were actually then would start looking at all the books just to get this certificate of nothing, right? That was long before Seinfeld, so you were still reading it back then. Now, so Spider-Man comes on the scene in the early 60s, but when I was a kid, and again in the 60s, then it was a cartoon very quickly. So how did Spider-Man sort of climb sort of the fame and fortune so fast to get on TV, given that a lot of characters usually take a decade or two before people start paying attention?
I met a guy who was an animator named Steve Krantz at a partner named Bob Lawrence. And he came over to me and he said, hey, we have an animation company and we'd like to put Spider-Man out as an animated cartoon. We're fans. First time a professional man had ever called himself a fan of one of our things. And they did it. And it was not mine to question why, mine but to do and die. They wanted to do a cartoon, let them do the cartoon. And they did it. And it became a little bit of a hit. And even the theme song, Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever a Spider-Man can, and it goes on and on. I can't sing, as you can tell. But that was our first theatrical hit.
And so you get the Spider-Mans going, and then at some point, so you create X-Men. And so give us your thoughts then that you and Jack Kirby create the X-Men. But then there's a lull, it doesn't sell very well, and then they have to reboot the X-Men, right? And Dave Cockrum.
I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, no, Len Wein and Dave Cockrum come in with the new Uncanny X-Men, right? So what was your thought of them sort of taking an original Stan Lee idea and basically bringing it up and bringing
I hated anybody taking any of my ideas, but I really don't remember that. You mean there was a time I stopped writing it and Cochran started writing it and what?
The introduction of like Wolverine, right, and Colossus, and what these people would refer to as the X-Men, the movies, right, where you had the original Beast and Cyclops.
Well, I don't remember it happening, but what must have happened was we were creating a lot of new characters at the time, and I probably didn't have time to keep writing the X-Men, so they took over, and I was doing Daredevil or whatever the other characters were that we came along with. Because in those days we were coming up with new characters all the time. There was Doctor Strange, the Hulk, there was, Iron Man, let's not forget Iron Man, and all of them, whatever there was.
Now, for people who are fairly young, you may not know there was a world that did not have Federal Express, an overnight delivery. And because of that, there was a time, Stan will tell you, where the vast majority of people working in comic books lived in New York, correct? Because you had to deliver your artwork into the New York offices. But you became one of the first sort of big comic book guys. I remember when you moved out to California, I was aware as a young man going, wow, Stan Lee's leaving sort of the hub. What was it that led you to go to the West Coast and break rank, if you will?
I'm going to tell you exactly what happened.
We're here for it, why ask?
I came out to Los Angeles one day on business, I don't remember why, and I couldn't believe the weather. I love warm weather. I mean, I love the weather here today, and instead of being outside, I'm sitting in a stupid air-conditioned room inside. Anyway, I love the hot weather, and I had a convertible in New York, and you could only keep the top down about 2 days out of every month in New York, because the weather was either raining or cold or something. I went out to Los Angeles on business. I thought I was in heaven. The sun was shining all the time, and it was warm. So I said to my wife, we are going to move to Los Angeles. Now, how was I going to do that? So I dreamed up a scheme. I called a meeting of the people at Marvel, the head people, and I said, you know, we shouldn't let other people do cartoons of our characters. We should do our own cartoons, and we ought to set up our own little cartoon producing studio in Los Angeles. And I am willing to uproot my family and move out there to do it for Marvel. And there wasn't a dry eye in the place. You would do that for us, Stan? And I said, yes. And we moved out. I've always been a big phony. I mean, I'm a big liar. And so that's how we moved out there, and I love it.
And so I assume then that part of you being now out on the West Coast starts leading to more and more meetings in Hollywood. Because, you know, we're now in this era where you're more famous today than you were 30 years ago. Because everybody knows Stan from his cameos. Anybody seen any of his cameos? The king of cameos, right there. So talk to us about your cameos. Like, how big is your trailer when you go to the set? And how much free food do you get? And the limousines, and tell us, Big Shot, how it works. Your cameo. Talk to us about your cameo. Tell us how a cameo. Come hear all your movies. Mr. Hitchcock.
It started, Bryan Singer, who did the first X-Men movie, when some politician came out of the water on a beach, there was a scene, he had turned into a weird creature, or a weird guy, and as he walked out of the water like this, people on the beach were looking at him askance, because he looked so strange. So Bryan Singer, the director, wanted people on the beach to see this guy walking past, and he wanted the people like this. So he asked me, couldn't have just people standing there, they had to be doing something. So he asked me if I would sell hot dogs. So I had a little hot dog stand on the beach, and when this guy walked by, I was putting some mustard or something on a hot dog, and I went like this. Not quite that corny, but you get the idea. And that was it. That was my first cameo. Then who directed the first Spider-Man again? Sam Raimi, my friend, I've got his name.
Sammy.
When Sam Raimi did the first Spider-Man, which I think came after that, there was a scene where something is happening up above in the building. And Spider-Man fell down, as I don't remember. But everybody is looking up like this. And he said, you be one of the people looking up going, ooh, ooh. And I'm very good at going, ooh. So that was my second cameo. Then I guess the other directors doing the other movies felt, why should they have the use of all of Stan Lee's cameo talent and not us? So everybody's been giving me cameos, and I'll tell you what I've decided to do. I don't remember if I've told you this or not. I was thinking maybe I should give other people cameos in my cameos. That would be kind of cool. Doing them. In fact, I'm leaving tonight to go east, where we're going to shoot 3 cameos for the next 3 movies at the same time. I'm going to do that tomorrow. It'll be very exciting. I can't tell you what the cameos are, because I have no idea what they are. They never tell me. Well, I'll tell you another funny thing. When you go to wardrobe, the other day, well, some weeks ago when I was doing a cameo, they sent me to wardrobe. Now, I came in wearing a pair of jeans, a pair of sneakers, a white shirt, and a sweater, a black sweater. So I go to wardrobe, and they say, okay, we gotta give you the clothes to wear for the scene. Take off your clothes and put on these jeans, white sneakers, white shirt, and the black sweater. I said, that's what I'm wearing. I said, no, it has to be our jeans and shirt and sweat. And I get that all the time. But I don't care, because what I do, I keep their clothes at the end of the scene. And I take them home. You gotta watch out for me. Don't ever invite me anywhere.
So when we see you walking down the streets of Hollywood, you look just like your cameos, is what you're saying, right?
When I walk around the street in Hollywood?
Yeah, you look just like your cameo. You're dressed in your cameo outfit.
I don't have one specific cameo outfit. You know, weren't you paying attention?
I was.
I have to tell the story. And I'm giving you one instance when I was wearing jeans, a white shirt, sneakers, and a black. I wasn't wearing that at every cameo. At some other cameo, I might have been wearing regular pants and a green shirt. I mean, why am I on the stage with this band?
I just love your color palette of beige shoes, beige socks, beige pants, and a beige shirt. So I just love
the whole
everything
world
about
copies the way I dress, and you're criticizing. some guy from a sneaker company came. They want to do Stan Lee sneakers. And so if you see him advertised, you better buy him.
And because he's old, the slogan is just kind of do it.
I didn't hear that. I bet it was cruel. See, the funny thing, I have strange hearing. I can hear okay, but I cannot hear what's said through this. So when he's talking into the mic, it sounds to me like, but he doesn't stop. He keeps using the mic. He doesn't want me to know. Because if I know, I might be cleverer than him. But if he can keep me not knowing, he comes across.
I'm just prepping for the day that I get to be in that chair. So I'm just trying to learn from it.
No idea what he's saying. Is that my picture on the screen? You know what's bad about that? I never can see my face. You always see the back of your head. How can I see a screen that shows my face? Does this one show my face? There's something wrong with the way these things work.
People in the back. It's the people in the back. That's why they have this. They don't have good eyes like you.
Wait a minute. Speaking of the people in the back, I thought I saw an empty seat. I don't talk when there's an empty seat. I like a full house. So, all right, you go.
So now we've got the big movies are now going global, right? All your movies are going global, right? So are there any of, I mean, again, they're all your babies, so it's always a tough question. Is there a favorite amongst your babies of the movies you've seen so far?
You mean of the Marvel movies? I love them all.
They're all your children.
Each one is better than the last one. Hey, and Deadpool. And I'm so miserable that I didn't create Deadpool. But you can't have them all. But there was one line that I thought was brilliant. Everybody is shooting at him. And he looks down and he says, I've only got 11 shells. You'll have to share to the bad guys. I thought that was the most brilliant. Who wrote that? I gotta find out who wrote it. That was brilliant. Anyway, go ahead. I interrupt him and he loses. He's not good at keeping a train of thought. You probably noticed that. I've been working with him on it. Keep yourself organized. Don't go wandering off the way you do.
Stan, unlike you, I'm getting old. So,
I'm not getting old, you idiot. I am old.
So let's go back in time. So
wish I could.
So Stan Lee is you're starting Marvel comic books in the early '60s, right? Now there has to come a time where, and I don't even know what the answer is to what I'm asking you, that at some point Jerry Conway, Roy Thomas, Len Wein, they come in and have to write the books. Is it because you didn't have enough time, you couldn't keep up, or because you were expanding so many titles, you needed to bring more people into it? Because they were sort of, to me...
Oh, I had the time. I just figured, why should I do all the work?
And so that next wave, what was the instructions you gave them? Was it to continue what you were doing? Or was it to sort of keep adding to the tapestry of the storyline back then?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but what happened was I had been writing the books for so many years, and then they made me the publisher. And as publisher, I had to do other things, and I didn't have the time to write the books. So what do? You get somebody else to write the books for you. There was Roy Thomas, Len Wein, all the guys you mentioned. They were good writers. They had been working on the books for years. They were assistant editors. So I made them the editor and the writer of whatever books they were. And they've been writing them, and then new writers came in. And I don't even know the writers at Marvel anymore. Some of them are so new, haven't even met them yet. But what's happening is this. Years ago, a really good writer, the kind of writer who could sell novels or screenplays, wouldn't dream of writing comic books. Now it's different. Now the top writers in the country or in the world, they want to write Marvel comics because they know everybody will read them and the chances are they will turn into movies. So it's all been reversed. Comic books, which were once looked down upon, have now become like the top level of culture in the country, and it doesn't make me unhappy.
No, comic books, the biggest change I've seen since I broke into comic books is that we've gone mainstream, right? Just so you people know that the Hollywood Walk of Fame finally decided to give an honor to a comic book person, my good friend Stan Lee. So we now have a comic book person on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, right? We're legit. Comic books are legit.
The first week I stood in front of that little thing on the sidewalk, and I would have punched anybody who stepped on it. Now I'm very casual about it.
See the picture where I laid down next to it? I put it on my Facebook. I laid in the middle of the street, laid next to it, and all the homeless guys ran away because they thought I was like even more homeless than them. Going, why is he hanging out here? This is where we usually sleep. So, but what it does though, the one thing I've noticed when you and I used to go to comic conventions, right? The San Diego Comic-Con, remember, was a comic convention, right? It's now a pop culture event. And what has happened is the mainstream, I'm with you, that comic books have gone mainstream and it helps all of us, right? Like everything we do now, like you're saying, is legit. So when we now walk into, it's strange, when we walk into Hollywood, they want our ideas, right? Before, we were sort of stepchildren, and now they're going, what do you guys have? Bring us your books. They like comic.
Now they push people, excuse me, Steven Spielberg, get out of the way. I think that's Stan Lee with Todd McFarlane who want to talk to you. If I may broach another subject, which I think is tremendously important, and I need your help. The word comic book.
Oh, here we go.
Well, no, this is important. See, I'm a perfectionist. This man doesn't care about things. Usually when people write comic book, they write it as 2 words. I bought myself a comic book. It should never be written as 2 words, because as 2 words it means a funny book. I bought a comic book, a funny book. It should be 1 word. Comic book is 1 word. It's a type of book. It's not a funny book. It's a comic. A lot of people here, and if every one of you, it's not asking much, writes to your senator and your maybe Trump will take this on as a big campaign issue. Sorry, I interrupted you, Logan. He has a whole thing all prepared, and I'm making him get off it. I'm sorry.
But the fun I'm going to have on your tombstone, and I'm going to put a space in between it, just to bug you for the rest of your life.
I didn't understand a word you said.
That's good, just say yes. So some of the artists you work with in the 60s, Jack the King Kirby, Don Heck, Gene Colan, Steve Ditko.
Gil Kane, John Buscema, John Romita.
Right, so do you have any memories, recollections about their personalities or their drawing?
Of course I do, you idiot. I worked with them for years.
Well,
how would I not have recollection? Jesus, I'm leaving this. What do you want to know?
I just talk to us.
I don't care what you want to know. What should I say that they would want to know?
Like either their drawing style, whether you liked one guy's style more than another, whether they were fast, somebody was slow, they were creative, anything. Because these are people now, a bunch of them passed.
All right, I'm going to tell you, but before we get into that, I don't know if you're aware of this. This man, whom I can never understand a word he says, this man wrote and drew an issue of Spider-Man, which had been our best-selling issue of Spider-Man ever. done by Todd McFarlane. Which proves you don't need talent to be a Superman.
It's true, it's true.
Now, about the artist. Jack Kirby, to me, was far and away the king. I gave him the name King Kirby, because he was the king to me. I would watch Jack draw, and it was almost as if he was tracing, as if the drawing had been there already, and he was just going over it. He never hesitated. He'd never do a line and erase it and do it over again. It's like everything he drew was just the way it should be. And he could design characters and costumes, and he was magnificent. And he also could draw a strip. He should have been a top Hollywood director. He always knew the best scene to draw, the best angle, and so forth. And he was the fastest. Good as he was faster than anyone else. So he would be number one for me. Right after that came all the other guys. I mean, John Buscema, he was like an Italian master, you know, the way he drew. He's fabulous. John Romita, we couldn't have existed without him. Anytime I needed help on anything, if he had to imitate a Kirby job, because Kirby was sick, he would do it and you'd think Kirby drew it. He had it when Steve Ditko gave up Spider-Man. Romita took Spider-Man over, and for the first few issues, you wouldn't know it wasn't Ditko. He drew it just like Ditko did, until slowly he went into his own style, which is what I wanted him to do. And then there was Gil Kane, who was fast and good, a real professional. There was Gene Colan, who was a big movie buff, and he tried to draw everything as if they were scenes from movies. I could go on and on. Every one of our artists was great, and it was lucky for me because it made the stories I gave them seem better than they were because they drew them so well. So I loved them all.
And to go back to Jack Kirby, what Stan was saying, the amazing thing about Jack Kirby is if you have ever seen him draw, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, he would start in the corner of a blank page and would just start drawing. And when he said he wouldn't mess up, he didn't do any rough. Like if you got any sketches today, every one of the guys probably did a little bit of a rough, and then they started getting tighter with their pencil. Jack Kirby did none of that.
The rough was all in his head.
It was in his head. He was looking at a blank piece of paper, he would start to draw at the corner, and he would just fill it in, and then the page was done, and there was no, it just was magic, right? It was magic what he did. It was, and he was fast. He was fast. John Buscema, for some of you who don't know, made a giant mark on Conan the Barbarian. So if any of you have seen Conan the Barbarian, he did the vast majority of it. Gene Colan did a tremendous run on Iron Man, but to me, what he did on Tomb of Dracula, 70 issues of it was the best comic book of anything that I had read visually. I thought it was spectacular. And then, who else? Oh, Gil Kane was arguably the biggest influence on me for dynamics. Gil Kane was Broadway. If you guys know Gil Kane, when somebody got hit, right? They went flying through walls, right? There was no little punches. Everything was big for Gil Kane. So it was true. At that time, DC Comics, the art was okay, but it wasn't marvelous and dynamic, you know, to go with the stories that you were telling. And I think that was one of the things you were looking for, right?
I used to jump up on the desk and act things out for the artists to let them see how I wanted everything exaggerated, you know. Yeah. Those were good days. Now that you mention it, I'm thinking of it. I loved working with those guys. They were terrific, and they made everything I wrote look better than it was. And so, bless them all.
All right, so we're down to 15 minutes, so do you want to go to some questions here from the audience?
Not particularly. If I don't know the answer.
The answer. So instead of listening to my questions, why don't we get
Oh, if it'll shut you up for a while, yeah, let's take some. But you gotta tell me what it is. I won't hear them.
That's why I'm here. All right? You're Batman, I'm Robin. Let's go, Bruce. right? Okay, young man, we got a young little fan here. What do you have for him? Stanley.
Do they rate in Excelsior?
Do they rate in Excelsior? I don't know. Hey, so